talk this morning is titled Psychic Senses and the Mental Life. Before I get started, I would like to invite those of you who are watching our YouTube video right now to realize that we do have a service before the lecture begins, and this service includes a really nice meditation and a reading from the teachings, and it gives us an opportunity to become aligned, to align our consciousness with the light of the higher mind so that we can be more receptive and think more deeply about the teaching. So if you're interested in that, I suggest that you go to our website, wmea-world.org, and that will take you to our website, and you'll see on the menu, a menu on the left-hand side of the homepage, a place where you are invited to register for our Sunday services, live stream and free. And thank you all for coming this morning too. So let's begin talking about our mind. Your mind and mine. My mind. Think of this. Human minds are little whirlpools in the planetary mind. Human minds are little whirlpools in the planetary mind. As our cells and organs live in the sphere of our own mind, we also live as a cell in the sphere of the planetary mind. Doesn't this change our whole perspective, of who we are and the influence that we not only give out, but we also receive from greater energy levels? That we're not just an isolated little human being. I just think this is so beautiful, and even though it may be a little tough to understand because most people are not yet in contact with the planetary mind, nonetheless, this is our future. So this is something for us to think about, and especially not to think I'm not worthy enough to be in contact with the planetary mind, or I'm not brilliant enough or special enough. All you need to do is to be on a spiritual path, working on yourself, expanding your consciousness, trying to create a line of contact which we call the Antakarana Bridge, building a line of communication between what we call the mental unit and the mental permanent atom. And it's like a bridge that takes us into and gives us contact with this planetary mind. I just think it is so remarkable. And you know what I really appreciate knowing is that we have a great future ahead of us. This life, next life, lifetimes to come, that it doesn't end with who we are and what we are and our level of beingness right now. That we have the potential of becoming great human beings. We have to work for it. We can't just stand here and say, look how great I am, because we're not yet, But we're not going to become great by ourselves. And this is why we need to realize that our cells and organs live as a cell in the sphere of the planetary mind. That we as a group, we as a humanity, as we build this bridge that we also call continuity of consciousness, we are all going to move forward and learn things that even 100 years ago was not even in the consciousness of humanity, but now in manifestation. we're going to surpass that 100,000 times. But we have to start our process right now. So today's talk is going to, I'm hoping, trigger or ignite the idea that I'm not great now, but I have that potential. And that potential is going to be realized when I make a contact, conscious contact, with the planetary mind. So what does this mean to us? Well, I will talk a little bit more in detail about it later, but to get there, to get to that place of consciousness, we have different stages of experiences that lead us, like laser light or a beam of electricity that magnetically draws us from one place to another as we strive. And one of those stations is called the rain cloud of noble things. Now, we're not going to travel there physically. We're not, we're too dense. Our bodies are too dense right now to travel there physically. But in consciousness, we have no limitations except what we have created ourselves. So as we free our consciousness from our karma, from our vanity and ego, from our self-centeredness, we achieve a little bit more freedom in consciousness, a little bit more freedom in consciousness. And pretty soon we find that we're making contact with this sphere called the rain cloud of noble things. Now, this particular rain cloud, according to Alice Bailey, she says, this is a sphere that indicates the emergence of that which is new and better and progressively right. It's a lot of words that we may not always understand, but when you're in that experience, you begin to recognize the different layers or strata of consciousness that surround this whole planet and go out into space. And it's just like getting onto an elevator and going to the first floor and the second floor and the third floor and the fifth floor. And your consciousness, what will happen is that your consciousness, as a result of your awareness, will take you to these different higher levels of awareness and move you into this sphere called the rain cloud of noble things. Now, what are we going to do with that? We're going to see what people on this planet would say science fiction. But it's not science fiction. I'm trying to think, there's another, besides the rain cloud of noble things, that's kind of an old term in the teachings. Another one is called materia lucida. Again, this is a realm or a sphere in space that's very real. And it is, to limit our imagination a little bit, it would be like going into a huge building and filled with disciples and initiates who are engaged in creating prototypes that will eventually reach the mind of an initiate or a disciple that's on the planet, and they take that prototype and put it into manifestation. All of these prototypes, all of these ideas, these plans are initiated from the planetary mind. So it's, am I making sense to you? Okay, oh good. So one of our greatest tasks is to learn to communicate and fuse with that great mind. You know, this is a talk that people who are from Missouri, you know, seeing is believing, or everything is in black and white, would say, wow, this is a fantasy. But when you have these experiences, it's no longer a fantasy. It's very real. All discoveries and achievements are breakthroughs into that mind, into that planetary mind. Every thinking person, according to his interests, this is a key point here, according to his interests. Now, if his interest is simply to build an edifice of gold, he doesn't need the planetary mind to do that. He can go visit the Taj Mahal to get some ideas and then just gold plate it. See, this is, and I'm not being disrespectful of the Taj Mahal. I was just thinking, it just came to mind, and there was a news bit about the Taj Mahal this last week where some model was demonstrating fashion, and India is now after her because it's, you know, the Taj Mahal is so sacred. And it's also very sacred to those who are on the Agni Yoga path and the path of hierarchy, because one of the masters was the creator of the Taj Mahal. So it's even more sacred to us. But that Taj Mahal was, the prototype was found in the planetary mind. And then in the creation of that prototype, some was lost. Some things were lost. Wouldn't you like to know? Wouldn't we like to know what was left out? Anyway, so every thinking person, according to his interests and needs, penetrates into that mind and brings out many discoveries and creates many inventions. Are we thinking people? So this is a question we really need to seriously ask ourselves. You know, am I a thinking person? Because most people are not. Most people just simply imitate others or regurgitate what they hear, and then they put their own spin on it and call it mine. Or they put it in a book and say, this is my idea, and so forth. Thinking people are usually people whose consciousness are open to this rain cloud of knowable things. Now, this may come as a surprise, because still there remains a problem with those who are thinkers. So just because we're a thinker doesn't mean we're home free, spiritually home free. The problem is this, is if they still have a modicum of vanity or ego in their beingness, they're going to use that information for what? Their own use. Okay? They use that gain of knowledge for their own use. In other words, for the interest of themselves, or in some separative way, you know, in a way of greed or supremacy. This makes me extraordinary. Bow at my feet. Then, in turn, what happens if that intent is to use their knowledge for personal gain? Then that individual's personality becomes distorted. Distorts the thought. See, so they were able to make contact with the content of the planetary mind, but then it turned against them because they began to use it for their own separate ends. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, this is just the way the system is. But the good news, there is good news here, is that there is a protective measure in place, which is called a law. The law of the planetary mind. And what happens with this law is that the planetary mind severely punishes all those who steal knowledge from the planetary mind and use it for their selfish interest. Now, to add to your information, the planetary mind has all solar knowledge. It has all solar knowledge. Such knowledge will benefit humanity. If we go back, and let me reread what Alice Bailey said, that in these spheres, or halls of wisdom and learning, in these spheres indicates the emergence of that which is new and better and progressively right. Can we allow our imagination to expand to a point where it can include what the solar logos has in his mind? It passes it into the planetary mind, and our little cells are just kind of floating around, in that planetary mind, and we happen to make contact. Why not? But we need to make sure that we have developed humility, that we have developed a consciousness that is no longer burdened by all, our glamours and illusions and Maya and so on and so forth. What happens when some people contact that planetary mind is that it makes them a superhuman being. So here we are as human beings, but now we're being told we have an opportunity to be a superhuman being. Being a superhuman being gives us an opportunity to develop our own latent powers, our soul powers, in other words. So that's giving us a little clue here, is that if we want to be extraordinary, if we want to become somebody, if we want to become a great person, then all we have to do is to develop our soul powers. Now, in developing our soul powers, this means we can live in many dimensions of consciousness simultaneously and consciously, if it is used for the benefit of all living forms. So do you believe this? Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll find it interesting, because I certainly did as I was engaged in all my studies to put this talk together this morning. I think you're going to find it interesting to know that our minds are charged. Our minds, your mind, my mind, are charged by the substance of the planetary mind. Now, the planetary mind functions on our atmic plane. This is why humanity has such a long way to go yet. It's still struggling with the subconscious. But communication, wow. This is why our minds are charged. This is why we are able to communicate with the planetary mind, because the planetary mind charges our mind with its substance. communication with the planetary mind is, drum roll, okay, is thinking. Is thinking. Once we start to think, we either become a transmitter of light for humanity and the great mind, or just the opposite, through our selfish, destructive, fearful, and hateful thought forms. Then we become an agent of pollution for our planetary body. So all we have to do is look at the planet today. And we know that we're in trouble. There's so much we could talk about, but we can certainly think about this. And if you go to lunch today or tonight, you talk to your friends, take the information from this lecture and expand on it. Build your ideas. And see how real you can make it. And then think about our planet that's in trouble. And what can we do to make a difference? When you say, well, I'm just one person, I can't do anything. Well, I haven't listened to the whole program yet, but the story that was, the girl that was interviewed in 2020 this week, Malala, the young girl, I think she's 14, that narrowly escaped death. Look at the difference she's already making in this world. And of course her aim right now is education of young people, but when she grows up, she's going to be, I would bet you, she will be as well known as Mother Teresa was. So this is a little clue that she has the potential of being a petal in the lotus of the Mother of the world. So we need to, as disciples of hierarchy, if we consider ourselves to be, then we need to find ways and means to support the ideas and visions of people, that we believe are in communication with the planetary mind. Our mental body coordinates with our brain. Our mental body coordinates with our brain when the bridge between the mental unit and the mental permanent atom are connected or built. It is then the fires of matter traveling through the etheric spine fuse with our mental fires. I'm trying to go slowly here so you can assimilate what's being said. When this is accomplished, a great amount of spiritual energy pours down from your head center and electrifies your entire body. This means you can no longer just be an ordinary person. And when you, I'm such an idealist, so let me say this. One of my jobs that I've taken on in this lifetime is to teach humility to people. So when I find a person of humility, I'm totally in love with them. Because you don't find humble people. But when you find humble people, this is what happens. They take care of themselves, but they are not taking care of themselves for self-importance. What happens is that they are so connected, etherically, they are so connected with other human beings that they're going to be there for that human being no matter what. Not because of who they are, not because of the fact that their head center is open and that they have an electrified aura It's because they recognize this incarnation is an opportunity to help their environment evolve. So you see, it's not about them. And that's what humility does. It says, I know who I am, I know who I am not, and I know what I can be. So they engage in a service, but that service comes as a result of the spiritual energy that's pouring down from their highest head center and then electrifies their entire body. So they can do more than an ordinary person. They become like Mother Teresa. You know, look at that little bent over body and her rivers, you know, in her face and so forth. But look at what she was able to do. And it wasn't about her. It's interesting. Okay, so thinking. Thinking is also a process of eliminating from our mind all those elements which prevent us from having contact with that great mind, that planetary mind. Eliminating all those elements which prevent us from having contact. As we open our mind to the great mind, the light, that light in that great mind is either going to nourish all the flowers and seeds of greater creativity, or it's going to nourish all the weeds and vices and make them grow out of control. Isn't that interesting? It's just like a full moon experience. You know, some people during their full moon experience, they're inspired, they write poetry, they create a plan for the next year, they kick, jump, start, what's that word? What? Jumpstart, that's it. They jumpstart things into motion. Whereas others, they go home and shut their front door and they don't come out for 5 days because of being depressed. It's the same light. It's what that light ignites when it makes contact with our consciousness. So the planetary mind is the inherent intelligence of our planet. I'm going to start skipping through a few things here so I don't run out of time. To penetrate and live in the mental plane, we need to have an organized mechanism. To contact, to penetrate, and live in that planetary mind, we ourselves have to have an organized mind. It's like our physical body. Our mental body must be conceived and then eventually born. It must grow and develop its 7 senses. The mental plane can be, this is good. The mental plane can be entered into in sleep, in a trance state. We don't encourage trance states, but just letting you know. Or in deep thinking. They're providing what? You have something, you know? A mental body, right? So the mental plane can be entered into if you have a mental body. Not too many people have a mental body. For it is true that the mental bodies of people are now in the process of being built. We are told that only about 20% of humanity have actually completed building that mental body. Now, there are this is so cute, there are baby mental bodies, even though they belong to adults. Okay? There are mental bodies whose senses are not yet developed. And I promised I'd be talking about psychic senses, so that's why I'm trying to plow through these ideas here. Then there are mental bodies whose senses are partially active. And then there are mental bodies in which some of the senses are damaged. And there are mental bodies in which the senses are used by dark forces. But there are also mental bodies which are healthy and have very well developed senses. So we have about 6 different points of view now when that mental body is coming into the process of construction, all the way to being completely built. There are mental bodies in which the light of the inner guide is shining, and that intuitional element is increasing. See, this is our future. This is your future. So these are all various stages of development and or degeneration. We must try to enter the mental plane with a healthy, well-developed, pure mental body. Right? Right. Okay, so the 7 senses. The 7 senses of the mental body must be developed in order to communicate with the mental plane. There has to be a sense developed in order to be able to communicate with that mental plane, and also the great mind of the planetary logos. The process is exactly the same as for our physical senses. If we want to hear things, what do we have to hear? Exactly, we have to have ears to hear. If we want to feel, we must have the ability to touch. If we want to see, we must be able to see. The mental senses can be developed while we are here, while we are in incarnation, while we are on the earthly plane. In the mental plane, the 7 senses have different names, which correspond to the senses of the physical body, but the senses of the physical body are much lesser than the senses of the mental plane. In other words, the senses of the mental plane are much more superior to those senses in the physical world. So here are the 7 senses. The first one is higher clairaudience. Higher clairaudience. The second one is planetary psychometry. The third is higher clairvoyance. The fourth is discrimination. The fifth is discernment. The 6th is response to group vibration. And the 7th is spiritual telepathy. All very intriguing. Okay. Okay, I'm going to move over to talk a little bit about these senses, not to leave you hanging. Okay, the first sense, higher clairaudience. When that first sense begins to develop, and if you're a therapist, just don't listen to this. You should see her face. When this first sense begins to develop, you start hearing voices in the mental plane, which are originated by thought currents. On the 3 lower levels, you will hear all mental conversations between people of those levels, as well as those who are on Earth, You see what's happening here? We're not talking just about a clairaudience that can hear Carol, her thoughts. She's laughing, that's good. Okay, but it's also entities that are functioning on the mental plane and the lower three planes. Imagine going into that situation and not being in balance. Yeah, it would be not a good thing. A higher clairaudient hears the sound which emits from your thoughts. You can hear the thoughts of your teacher, for example, or the thoughts of those with whom you have relationships. Okay, sense number 2, planetary psychometry. It's a little more challenging to understand. In the mental plane, this sense enables you to touch any form. I don't have an interesting form to touch. Here's one, the altar. Okay, it's an interesting form to touch. And you begin to know the origination. The reason I touched the altar because it's so beautiful. And we had it made, and we chose the wood and the person who made it and so forth. But it doesn't have a long history yet, but it will. It did get a little chip in it because we had to move it out when we were, removing everything out of the building because of the flood. And then we moved it back in. So now it has a little chip. So that chip, 100 years from now or 200 years from now, somebody's going to see that little chip and say, wow, I need to fix that. Well, we don't want to fix that because we know it's part of the history. So actually in the mental world, thoughts turn into objects. Thoughts turn into objects. When you hear a voice, for example, you can psychometrize that voice and see the whole story connected with the originator of the voice. And in the higher mental plane, this sense makes privacy totally obsolete. Totally non-existent. Okay, sense number 3 is higher clairvoyance, which enables us to see the causes of things happening on the mental plane. This is clairvoyance, that we can see the causes of things happening on the mental plane, and then we can see what goes on upon the earth. The 4th sense is, and the 5th sense, discrimination and discernment. Discrimination on the mental plane is a sense that makes you aware of whether or not your thoughts are in harmony with the cosmic magnet. So can you see how it's getting increasingly difficult? When you begin to function with these higher senses in the mental body, it takes time to develop. You're still in incarnation or not. If you are in incarnation, you've got a lot of work that's going on that you have to do, on the planet. And at the same time, another part of your consciousness is developing itself because it's in contact with the planetary mind. So the substance of the planetary mind is working with the substance of your mental body while you are still functioning on the earth. So when you begin to develop that higher sense of discrimination on the mental plane, it makes you aware of whether or not your thoughts are in harmony with the cosmic magnet. Whatever is inharmonious within you and around you is immediately recognized by straight knowledge. Okay? Thus, this sense keeps you in line with the destiny of what? Your soul. Remember I talked earlier about if you want to be an extraordinary person, you want to develop your soul powers. The fifth one I said is discernment, which helps us to discriminate between the causes. This is even more difficult. I can't even imagine this, but I guess someday we will all be there. Discriminating between the causes of all phenomena on the mental plane. And don't ask any questions about that. Okay. And the sixth sense is response to group vibration. And the seventh sense is spiritual telepathy, which further expands our contact with man and the universe. That's spiritual telepathy. Discipleship is preparation for the higher mental plane. And here's a factoid you'd like to know, that very often masters visit the higher levels of the mental plane, and the knowledge of the hierarchy is a fact there. And let me share this with you. I am jumping through various points, but you'll pick them up at somewhere, sometime. Okay. It is on the mental plane we can find mental flowers and birds. And what is so curious to me is that these flowers, not so much this is not so much the curious part that flowers are the works of devas, but that these devas become birds. So when we see birds on the higher mental plane, in fact, we are seeing devas. And when we see these beautiful, colorful flowers, to know that thousands of devas created them. Music on the mental plane is heavenly because we can see every color of the notes. And what's so beautiful is that these colors do not fade away, but form the most fantastic color structures. Often composers come in contact with these structures. And according to the level of beingness, compose their music. Those who have mental clairaudience, psychometry, and higher clairvoyance can bring to, now we're getting practical here and then I'm going to close, bring to the physical plane a certain degree of the music, a certain degree of the colors, the motions and the forms that they experience in the mental plane. Geniuses in the field of art have been on these levels and are impressed by the beauty there. This is why their art moves mountains and brings bliss to humanity. Okay, I think that's enough.